Good afternoon, Matthew here with Jupiter Bike. Today we're going to tackle the Chopper Upgrade Kit on the Jupiter Defiant. First thing with the kit, you're going to get a number of pieces. First of all, we're going to have a headset kit. Not everything in here is going to be used. Some of these parts are extra, such as the bearing caps and bearings. If you have a used bike, we gave you some freebies in there to replace the old stuff. Headlight installation hardware. This is for mounting the headlight to the bars after we have them installed. We have our headlight and horn module all in one. Our handlebars. And of course, our dual pipe fork kit. The fork kit will also have the triple tree already installed on it. This will be removed before installation. We'll get to that in the natural progress of things. First step we need to do is take the old hardware off of the bike and free up the electronics so we can install the headlight. First things first, we're going to take apart the front forks using a 5mm Allen key. We're going to remove the full brake caliper. Since we're going to be changing out forks, we don't need to leave any of the old hardware sitting around. Okay. Next, you may need the use of a 10mm wrench to remove the headlight horn module, and you may also have a fender on the back of yours already. You're going to want to grab the wing nut, give it a turn. And move on to the handlebars. Fully unscrew the latch. And I like to take the handlebars, bring them back on the pedals. Just kind of hangs them out of the way for right now. Keeps everything so you're not going to damage it. You're going to need a 10mm and the 5mm again. Loosen these. Now you can see everything freely moves. We have two methods of removal. You can use a small screwdriver, get underneath the edge of that to relieve it, allowing it to drop out. Or you can do a manual adjustment, back of your hand, rubber mallet, give it a tap, and it will pull through. Amongst all the parts, we have two bearings that come. These are sealed bearings for the headset. They're not necessary, but they are given if you need them. Way to check is take your finger and just turn around the inside of the bearing. If you feel any type of grinding, any type of just anything doesn't feel smooth as butter, you can replace that bearing. We sent you a new kit, and you're just going to get a screwdriver underneath, pop out the cap, and then these get tapped in with a rubber mallet. First step of installing the forks, you're going to need a 6mm Allen key. We're going to remove the top triple tree so we can slide into the bearings that we just freed up. So we're going to just remove the triple tree. We do want to make sure that these frame stops are in place between the triple trees before installation. These should already be on your forks. If they're not, find them in your box and place them on the post between the triple trees. Now, back in all the little bits that you got earlier, we have one of these little retaining rings with the split in it. Goes in with the bevel facing down. And you can press it in there a little bit. You probably won't be able to by hand. It's going to take the force of screwing down to hold. And after that, we have a dust cover also included. For the standard Defiant model, we're going to take 10 of the rings now, place them on the stem. And after we have the 10 rings, we go to place the triple tree again. This is one of those parts where you might need a second set of hands just to get things to line up and pry down. And to hold the triple tree in, hold the stack. We're going to go bevel side down. And then we're going to go with our 5mm again. And we're going to tighten down the headset. When it starts to restrict that turning, we know that we've got that shim pressed in. Everything's nice and tight. We don't see any abnormal spacing in the top of the head or in the lower head. Now we can adjust the height of the triple tree with the 6mm. We're gonna snug up the top triple tree. So 5mm, we're gonna remove the retainer for the handlebars. Next, we're going to install the handlebars. They should have a gentle curve towards the rider. After we've got the new handlebar installed, we need to get all of our kit off of the old handlebar. One of the most difficult processes can be removing these handles themselves. They are not glued on. Usually a twisting motion can help pull them off of the bar. If the twisting motion doesn't work for you, you can try to get some air in there using an air compressor or one of those little canned airs. If you can just slide the air in there to break the seal. When taking that one off, be careful inside your throttle. There's a little plastic retaining ring. A lot of times that slides out, gets dropped and stepped on, and your throttle's not going to work afterwards. Oh. Yay! We can look at the back side, everything else we have here. You're going to want a Phillips head screwdriver, and we're going to loosen up your gear lever for your derailleur. Just loosen up, no reason to totally unscrew it. If it wiggles on the bar, it's good, it will come off. Our 5mm again. 5mm is going to loosen up both of these brake handles. For the LCD, I'm going to use a 3mm. The throttle is going to be a 3mm. 2mm for our horn button. So now with everything loose, you can see it slides off easily. The longest part of the job is going to be undoing the wire loom. You're going to cut away these zip ties to start. My process of doing it is I'll take one side at a time. So I know my screen and my brakes here and my horn all go on the left side controls. Both sides of your wires off the handlebars, still grouped with the loom. Don't need the old handlebars. Now we're going to take all of our wires, all of our kit, and we're going to feed it between the frame and the handlebar. This way, when we're done with installation, all of our wires are channeled through this area. Get all of our wires. Our display side's going to be on our left side, and our gearing side is going to be on the right. So we're going to go on shifter first. After the shifter, we're going to take on the brake, and then at the end of the brake goes on our throttle. And we can kind of slide that all in. Now, remember that plastic piece that fell out of the throttle earlier when we took the grip off? You get that back on there so we don't lose it. And for right now, because we're still working and we got wiring to do, we're just going to put this back on loosely. Just like that, keeps all of our stuff from falling off and getting lost on the floor. After we've got one side of the wires installed, whether you did the right side first or the left side first, whatever your preference is, it's going to be easiest to undo the loom to attach the other side, just because of the tension in the lines. This is the most tedious, the lengthiest part of the install is doing the wire loom. Nobody wants to do it. It's not hard. And if you do it right, it looks good when you're all done. There we go. Okay, as you can see now we've got slack. We can safely put this stuff on without stretching or damaging any of the wires. We want to get our LCD on first. Power button goes towards the top, so you can read it when it's facing you. After the LCD, we get the brake lever and the horn button. Make sure we got the horn button facing the right way so you can see it while you're riding. And then we're going to loosely put the grip back on again just to hold all of our goodies here until we're ready to wrap it up. Now at this point, we've done the bulk of the work. We're just going to be undoing the rest of the wire loom back to the controller and installing the headlight at this point. Now with the wire loom removed, you can see we have access to all of our wires. We're going to be removing the headlight from the assembly. You have it right at the right angle and you can slip that back through. By folding the bike open, releasing the latch, we now gain access to the battery plate. Behind the male battery plate is where we gain access to the controller. This is also one of the safety things. I like to get the battery out of the way at this point too. Anytime I'm in this area, I get the battery away from the bike. By removing the 5 outer screws, we gain access. After removing the screws, the rest of the controller and the battery plate themselves are not secured by anything more than pressure. So we're just going to gently remove the battery plate. And as you can see, we have a nest of wires snugly holding the controller in. We'll gently bring out some of the wires. Once we've got the bulk of the wires out of the way, we're going to remove the controller. When you're removing the controller, take note of the charge port. Just kind of make sure you're to the side of that wire as you come out so you're not damaging your charge port. With the controller out, wires exposed, we can easily identify our headlight wire. I pull on the headlight, I pull on the wire. I have the right wire. We're going to disconnect this and we're going to feed this wire back through. I suggest doing this gently. I am struggling back here removing this wire. There is this rubber grommet. This is to help seal up the frame of the bike. It also prevents the wires from rubbing up against the raw aluminum. So just kind of put that ring back in. With the old headlight out of the way, now we'll access the new one. You notice the plug on the end is going to be the same as the old headlight. We're going to come to the front of the bike to start this because the headlight's going to go on the front of the bike, and we're going to feed the wire through with the rest of the wires. So we know we've got it in the right location. We're going to feed up into the casing. There we go. Get past that rubber grommet and we can just push the wire in, and our plug is going to come out here on the other side. And we plug the new one in. Something I always like to notice, just watch our blacks. Blacks line up. That's our ground line. We know we're all good. Okay. We're going to put the controller and the wires back in where they need to be. Similar to how we took them out, controller's going to go in first. We're going to be careful of that charge port line on that side of the case. Going to get our controller tucked back in there. And then we're going to move back in the wires. There's no set way of doing this. It's just doing it as neatly as you can without damaging or forcing anything too much. You want to make sure you got all your points of attachment lined up first, and then you start applying pressure. Now that we got our battery plate back on, we're going to want to just double check the system, make sure we haven't made any major mistakes before we get too far along. We'll close her back up real quick. So we know we got the headlight wired in. Now we've got to do the headlight mounting brackets. For your headlight mounting kit, you do have to install the pre-cut rubber pads to prevent slippage and vibration. Taking one of the smaller pads and the small side of the clamp, you're just going to center it and press it in. Keeping it in the middle of the mount, just keeping your edges clean, shouldn't have an issue with that. Same process on the lower pads. This one I find a little bit easier to actually kind of bend in place. We want to be sure that the pad is below the line. One screw and bolt, take one clamp kit. We're going to go around the bar, and then the screw holds these two together. And repeat the process on the other side. The last pieces included with the headlight are going to be the rubber washers or grommets and the bolts for connecting into the side of the headlight itself. All right, and we're going to want that rubber grommet on the side of the headlight, but also on the inside of the mounting bracket. Mounting bracket, rubber grommet, then the headlight, like so. Repeating the process on this side as well. We're going to go bolt, grommet into the headlight. Everything's just going to be loose for now until we get our wires where we want them all. Power the system on. We're going to test the horn. We're going to turn on the light. Checking the throttle. So now that we've tested the system works, plastic garbage. Rotor goes on the left side. So for installing the wheel, on the chopper kit, the forks do have a little bit of a lip cut on them. We're going to want to remove the retaining bolt on this side. Notice there is a spring. The spring tapers towards the wheel. We got our wheel in. We need to put our spring on there. Catch our axle and give just a couple turns. Simply push up on the quick release on the other side, and we have our wheel in place. On the front of the fork here, we have a brake line retainer. It can be positioned here on the front, or it can be positioned on the rear with the 5mm Allen key, used before. It's a favorite one to use today. We're going to take the mounting bracket off the bottom of the caliper. The chopper kit fork comes with mounting positions that line the caliper right up. We do not need the mounting bracket included with the caliper. And we're going to line the caliper up to the rotor, and then using the same screws we just removed from the bracket, we're going to mount the caliper to the fork. You don't want to tighten the caliper down all the way. You want to leave it enough that it's snug, but you can still move it on the screws. Yeah. Aligning the brakes is always tricky. Usually won't get it on the first try. But top, bottom. Small adjustments as you tighten, you'll get there. Since we pretty much got everything in place, we have our brake aligned, we have our headlight hooked up, we're just back to dressing the wires, reinstalling our loom, setting our handlebars and grips where you like them. A lot of this can be personal preference. Got our grips pushed back in all the way, firmly on the bars. And we're gonna eyeball about the level where we want our brake levers. We're gonna take a 5mm, and if you remember how we loosened it on the bottom, do the exact opposite, and we're gonna tighten it up. So we're gonna turn it to the right or clockwise. It's going to tighten that up. And then I'm gonna try to match my angle on the opposite side. One Phillips screw for our derailleur or gear adjuster. We take a 3mm for the throttle, and we're going to tighten it up next. So now we're going to get the LCD, again with a 3mm. So what I normally do is I'll rotate it down, get my Allen key lined up, and then I'll put that horn button back to where I like it, and then tighten it down. Last thing we're going to want to line up, give it a little wiggle side to side, little wiggle up and down, and it centers itself just about perfect. We're going to take a Phillips head screwdriver and a 10mm wrench. Going to put our 10mm wrench on the bolt on the back, and with that Phillips head screwdriver, just give it a couple turns till it's snug. We don't have to do anything crazy here. Step over, do the same thing to this side. I like to go finger tight on this. It makes it nice and stiff, but I can still turn it by hand and change my angle while I'm riding. We got our brake on there. We got our chopper kit installed. Headlight and horn is wired up. We just gotta do that lovely loom job. Remember this? Everybody does. We hate getting back to it, but we're gonna dress the wires now. In my preference, I'm gonna leave this hanging out here. I'm gonna join all these wires back up together with loom and run it all the way back. secure with a few zip ties, and we'll show you that when it's all done up. Now that we have the wire loom back installed, as we said, point of preference, this is how I prefer to do mine. Brought it with the brake line, and then I let the brake line go freely, but personal preference. Want to make sure that our stops are properly aligned so when it turns, makes contact with the frame. One of the last steps before we go for that first ride is we're going to grab the 6mm and we're going to go back at everything in the headset and make sure we're nice and snug. Having failure on the first ride is a bad thing. Doesn't hurt to check everything. Even though we didn't modify the lower tree, we can still check the bolts down here, make sure they didn't loosen up in shipping. And then we'll grab our 5mm. Check those bolts. Holding on your handlebars. Make sure everything's tightened down good. I'm Matt with Jupiter Bike, and that's our Defiant Upgrade Kit. As always, ride safe and be courteous to those on the trail.